Working. How about now? Here we go. We have liftoff. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for spending 25 minutes with us on this incredibly exciting panel that you're about to experience. I've got two incredible guests that I'm about to bring up. We've got a lot to cover, and so strap yourselves in and get ready for a bit of fun. My name's Alex Cheeseman. I head up the enterprise business for Outbrain. And today, our titans of industry are Phil and Nick. A big round of applause for Phil and Nick as they come and join me on stage.
An entrance.
Morning, gents.
Hello, hello.
Let's just do a quick mic test, because yours working?
Yep, sounds like it, yep.
And yours?
Yep.
Okay, super. So please do me a massive favor and introduce yourself to the audience, explain who you are, what you do, and perhaps just give a little bit of detail about the brand and business that you work for.
So Phil Clark, head up all paid media, including digital marketing at Canada Goose. For those not aware, we're a fashion retail brand that specializes in outerwear, in luxury outerwear. Born in Canada, the clue's in the name, but selling globally now with our biggest markets in APAC, North America and EMEA.
Brilliant, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nick Graham, and I head up international growth with Pluto TV, which is a fast TV streaming service. And prior to that, I've helped international brands, especially in the tech and telco space, scale internationally.
What kind of shows are on Pluto TV, just for those in the room? Actually, does anyone in this room subscribe to Pluto TV? Okay, one person. What are the shows on Pluto TV?
So we have the best of both worlds. We have live TV plus on demand, and we have a host of specific channels catering to audiences. So we do things like very specific channels, including news, sports, classic film, and classic TV series. And it's a fantastic proposition. Go check it out.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nick. Let's jump into the crux of what we want to cover today. What's your approach to understanding customers and for staying on the pulse of popular culture? And I'll start with you, Nick.
Yeah, I think it is a really interesting question. I think number one is you've got to still be passionate about your culture, your business, to be able to have a stake in it. So my way of staying in touch, for example, with my industry is to, I mentor with universities, with art students, people that are passionate about making great content, people that are shaping culture, people that have opinions about culture. In addition to that, you've got to stay relevant in terms of the news of the day, understanding what's happening in the world. So, that's another dimension. And I think possibly a third area would be, staying educated, staying passionate about specific topics that, drive interest, that are of the moment.
So for me and for us, what we're paying close attention to now is search and search behavior. And it's much broader now than just traditional search engines. So search within our website, search in traditional search engines, and now search on social. For fashion, particularly, TikTok is now surpassing Google in terms of young people looking for fashion advice and trends. So we can learn a great deal for how consumers and audiences are engaging with search. You can really start to understand people's passion points, anxieties. And for us, an SEO team that were once drilled into tech SEO and positions are now really digging into data to provide insights for us to understand where we should be showing up and what our message should be, so we can really engage with culture in the right moment.
Either of you, use any specific tools or techniques to kind of bring together customer data to better understand it? I know you mentioned search and social, but are there any tools that you use?
In that regard, it's sort of traditional SEO tools, and then we're working with our social agency partners as well to really dig into social trends and social search trends that are happening there. That gives us an external view. Internally, we're always looking at our CDP and how that is changing, how our actual customers are changing. So we've got a lot of internal first-party data that we're looking at, because it's rapidly changing month to month and quarter to quarter,
Yeah.
how people are engaging and buying from our brand.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd agree with Phil on that one. So internal tools and external validation from search and social, super important. I'd add one thing, which is on social, you've got your trend hopping, which is very short term, and that's kind of interesting in terms of getting a pulse or a barometer read on what's going on in culture. But the half-life is incredibly short. So you might get a particular trend that exists for a couple of days or a week, and you can really maximize the opportunity by saying, it could be something controversial in the news that someone's turned into a meme. If you're able to capitalize on that through what's going on in the online conversation, that's huge. So I just added to that, so you've got your own data,
Yeah.
plus what's going on in trends.
It's an important point because there's a real difference between social trends and then the trends of search as well.
Yeah.
You can see over time trends that are growing, passions, anxieties or needs and wants in consumers that are growing over time. And then you can plug into a demure trend that's going to put you in front of a large audience very quickly but die away. You have to make sure that you're utilizing all those sources and marrying the two so you don't just get a flash in the pan.
Yeah, and I'd say the key thing is to marry that sort of long-term, what are the brand's values? What are the brand's objectives? What's the brand purpose? And does a particular trend fit with that? And so are you engaging in the right conversations in the right place? And is that brand fit the right sort of thing for the particular conversation or trend? So if one gets those things right, the opportunity is big. We saw it with some of our interesting content that happened to mirror an interesting trend that was going on online, and the data it is exponential. The interest peaks, and whereas in the past you might plan a campaign that runs for several weeks. Now you're looking at trend hopping is it does have that very short half-life, and so you have to be much more agile. The planning needs to account for that contingency, that there are unexpected events, that you can't be too rigorous in your forward planning, and everyone, even in the communication, social, search team, have to understand what the brand's purpose, values, etc. are in order to capitalize on that data when they see it coming through.
It's a super hard challenge, right? Because essentially you're trying to focus on who you are and what matters to you, while at the same time trying to become culturally relevant. Have you guys seen is it the Gen Z scripts on TikTok? Have you seen it? Has anyone here seen the Gen Z? So again, a trend like that, which is brilliant, where you get a Gen Z to write a script and then get a traditional movie shot with some of the language that wouldn't necessarily be natural. It works really, really well. But how do you, again, finding that balance so you stay true to who you are, and also, fashion brands, culture changes and shifts over time. How do you stay culturally relevant with your product by staying true to who you are and what matters as things shift and change?
Yeah, I spoke about Gen Z targeting at MadFest actually earlier this year, and we talked about Gen Z becoming generalization Z, and just brands thinking, okay, what can we do to connect with Gen Zs, and just jumping on any bandwagon. And the key word that people were saying, a couple of years ago when it came to Gen Z was authenticity. You've got to be authentic. You've got to be authentic to yourself. Yeah. And you have to have something to be authentic about, and it's vital that you nail who you are as a brand and what your brand stands for and what your brand promises before you work out what to jump on, and it has to be relevant to your point. There's been some amazing examples of brands that you'd never expect jumping on that. Chester Zoo, I think it was, that I saw really recently. Okay. A really amazing example. You wouldn't expect it, but you can get it right as long as you understand where the foundation is that you're coming from.
I love that. We always think that the industry's changing, right? But we're still having the same conversations and debates that we were having 10 years ago. Like, if any of you are in any of your rooms with your agencies or your partners, and someone says to you, be more authentic, like fire them immediately. Like in the history of the planet, when has it ever helped anybody to not be authentic? It's absolutely bonkers. I want to move on. We've got a good understanding of kind of culture, the balances between the two. Talk to me a little bit about some of the campaigns that either of you have seen that have really impacted culture. Let's try and make it real for everyone that's sitting here. Phil, I'll start with you.
One that I've thought of, a brand that's been in the headlines a lot for what's happening in their marketing is Nike. And I think back to when Nike really influenced me, when it wasn't even very, they still are, obviously, but it wasn't even very long ago.
Sponsored by Nike.
Yeah, exactly. That they got personalization right because they got localization right.
Yeah.
And for me, if you lived in London, you felt like Nike was London's brand.
Yeah.
And that was true all over the world. That it was your streets that the trainers were walking on. It was your area that the tracksuit was seen in. You felt like it was for you.
Yeah.
And Nike had a real handle on culture and local culture when that was their strategy. And it's a shame that they moved away from that because you really saw a brand moving culture in that moment.
I love that example, man.
Yeah, I think Nike does it really well too. Yeah, there's so many great examples, and the fundamental question of are there relevant examples and recent examples where culture and has been shaped? We just need to think of the political campaigns the last few years. They've shifted, voting demographics, for example. But I won't go into detail on that. But,
yeah,
as far back as the 1980s, you had the anti-smoking campaigns, for example. And those have struck with me my whole life. And I can recall some great work done there. But more recently, I'd say, and moving forward in time, you've got things like campaigns that were ahead of their time that utilized technology that incorporated culture in an interesting way. So Aviva in around, I think it was 2009, 2010, You're the Big Picture. They invited their customers and prospects to upload their own images and to participate in the campaign. That type of work's been sort of unearthed again recently. You've got airlines doing that sort of work in the last couple of months. But it's work that would I would say tap into the cultural moment. So we like to participate. We're a social media driven audience. It's that moment. So are there campaigns that allow wider representation through the technology aspect? Those campaigns are quite interesting. So I think Aviva tapped into that at a very, very early stage. And in particular, in terms of brand work, that a strong idea always comes through. Lee Jeans, behind the scenes since 1889, that always resonated with me because it was always about the unsung heroes. So, let's say not necessarily the culture makers or the people in the limelight, the stars, but it would take people, let's say, in production, people in the kitchen, people behind the scenes, and foreground that aspect. So I think great advertising will always have one of two things in my view, either a super idea that really makes one reflect and think, or utilize technology in the moment. And that could be trend hopping like social media, or using something interesting which allows you to participate in the advertising. And those are two areas I always look for.
I love that, man. The participation thing I think is really interesting because if you want to drive any form of cultural change, you can't do it in isolation, right? You need to bring people with you. And often we think that we're in control of our brands, but actually brands don't exist. They only exist in everybody's minds in here, right? We can do our best to try and influence them and add shapes to them, but ultimately it's down to individuals and their perceptions of the world as to what the brand truly means to them. And then you ladder that up with the practical reality that we all think that we make rational purchase decisions, but what happens is we buy something and then we post-rationalize it. To your point around Nike, just out of interest, how many people in this room would choose Nike as the first pair of trainers that they would buy? One. Okay, so there's a few, but that if I'd have asked that question 5 years ago, I guarantee you that we would have had a lot more hands up. It's interesting to see what happens over time in terms of if you aren't staying culturally relevant, if you aren't feeling localized and personalized. I'd like to take the question now, gentlemen, and move it specifically into the world of brands. Like what is the role of brands in, I'm going to ask you first, Nick, in influencing, driving, and changing cultural change in the world?
I think that's a really difficult question, but it comes back to the remarks I made earlier, which is if your brand has certain values and a certain position regarding, it could be climate change or some, a particular movement, and as long as you're true to your values, you have the opportunity then to participate in that particular discussion and shape it. If, for example, your brand doesn't really fit with the environment for whatever reason, it would probably be best not to participate in those kind of discussions, or certainly to be aware of of what's going on. So I think as a brand, you're in a really complicated space where you have to navigate when to and when not to participate or speak or shape culture.
Yeah.
So, and I think the second dimension, which is often overlooked, which is, it comes back to those brand values, but it's also what is your organization or business selling? What are you actually trading with? And for me, I think the magic really happens when things are aligned. It comes to your brand, its values, your product proposition, and a particular time or movement, in culture. And if there's alignment there, then the participation and shaping of culture works really, really well. And it might be stating the bleedingly obvious, but so many brands might choose to step in to a space which is probably not suited to do. So when and how to speak is really important, and that's the shaping culture moment, I'd say.
It's just funny when COVID arrived and every single ad you saw was a black and white, sepia, piano tinted, we're here for you, right? Not every single brand can play, but how do you, how do you figure out where you should and shouldn't? Because there's so much more expectations. You look at all of the Edelman trust barometers, right? And trust in governments is clearly falling, but trust and reliance in businesses, particularly CEOs, is increasing, right? They should have a voice, they should have a perspective. Like, what are your thoughts in terms of like the things how do you figure out what you should have a perspective on and what you shouldn't?
Well, I think it's knowing that your business very well. It's equally knowing the epoch, the times you live in, the news, the trends, knowing those very well, and you've got to look for that fit, and it requires a lot of attention. So, it could be. It could be a national disaster or climate-driven disaster where your business is able to step in and assist because you're providing a certain service. And if it's a genuine route to helping resolve an issue, perhaps then it's okay to say something about it. But often one has to handle those situations with extreme delicacy. And COVID was no exception.
Yeah, I want to come back to the point around brands and delivering meaningful values to the world, because I think it's a really big, important topic. But I do want to touch on what's your thoughts on the role of brands in driving and shaping culture?
I'm trying to work out how to talk about this without going down a massive rabbit hole, right? Because
please, we've got 6 minutes.
Right. Well, I think the biggest, especially in digital marketing, we played a massive part in a shifting culture, which is social media, and how this is shaping people's minds, particularly young people. And we have a real responsibility as brands of how we communicate and play in that space, and it's so difficult. But the types of influencers, creators that we work with, and how they're communicating with their audiences, the pushing back on the status quo of complete automation to make sure that we're speaking to the right people with a relevant message, and it's value in your content. That's where you really need to make a change, because the biggest cultural shift I think we've seen is a dangerous one. That's taking over people's mindsets and mental health in how people are engaging with their phones and with media and social media. And we have a real responsibility as brands to help navigate that.
I mean, it's public knowledge, right, that social media is the biggest cause of teenage depression and suicide on the planet, yet it still exists as a massive tool to reach people. And it's like, at what point do we make those decisions and say, do you know what, in 10 years' time, I don't want to be responsible for all of these things, right? And it's a really hard piece, because we all believe that we have to do good in the world. Like no one in this room wants to wake up in the morning and think, do you know what, I'm going to help people buy more stuff that they don't need. We're inherently good people. We want to create a better world, and we want to be more sustainable. We think that by doing things that are good for the world, we will be rewarded. But I mean, there's a constant tension with that. And I'll use a recent example, like Unilever, wonderful brand, absolutely incredible people running all the businesses. They had commitments to reduce plastic by 2025. They pushed those and reduced them to 2026. You'd think that would have a negative impact on them, but their share price rose 26%. So we've got to find that balance between like consumers voting with their money and shareholders voting with their minds. It's a really difficult place to be.
Yeah, but I mean, something that is changing in culture is the younger generations are more clued up than we were, than we have been, and older generations have been, in terms of how this all works, and what the mechanics are, and what it's doing to society and what it's doing to the environment. So things that might not be in the consumer mindset, at the front of the consumer's mindset now, are coming to the fore, and they will do. So it's important that we get on top of that, manage that balance between moral and business, but also, as many brands have noticed with sustainability, it is truly important to move in the end goal.
Yeah, it's non-negotiable, right? I think the challenge that we've got is, until technology allows sustainability to be cost-effective, then we're always going to have a debate and a challenge, and we're never going to get to the point whereby it's completely ubiquitous. There's the expense that I think is very difficult for consumers to pocket, particularly when we don't all have unlimited budgets. I'm going to close things out now, and I'd love you to both give a piece of advice to someone thinking about coming into the industry. Yeah, I'll ask you first, Nick.
Yeah, I think the internet right now, and marketing and communications is suffering from the divisiveness of culture and internet-driven debate and discussion, or the lack thereof. So there's a lot of divisiveness on the internet. So my advice to someone coming into the industry and working on behalf of brands would be, maybe think carefully about, that moment I hope will pass, where that divisiveness has been a kind of long-standing moment of the internet, but we hopefully will move to one where brands and businesses and communities can leverage the internet to bring people together, to think more carefully around, how does one reach consensus? And so doing that through communication, doing that through causes, is a much harder task than driving debate, discussion, and fueling tensions. So you see a lot of that happening online. But my advice to someone would be, are you the right person to help bring people together, to create communities, to create consensus? And for me, that would be helping brands deliver greater good. So I think that sort of mindset of people coming into industry would be super helpful, and that would be some of my advice.
Thanks, Nick.
For me, for someone coming into marketing, the best advice I can give is empathy. Have empathy. Yeah. I'd argue that you'll never work in a harder industry in terms of proving your value. And when you understand where people are coming from, that really want to understand that value, that will make you a better marketer. There are a plethora of data sources we can use. Never mistake one data source to be fact. There's nuances to everything. You need a broad range and a broad view, and you need to understand where other people might be coming from within a business that are trying to extract the value of marketing. If you can empathize with where other people are coming from, and this is whether you're brand side, agency side, tech vendor, if you can empathize where people are coming from, it will make you a better marketer, and you'll go far.
What a wonderful way to close things out. Empathy and be the driver of change. If I can have a big round of applause for my wonderful panelists. Thank you all very, very much. 2, 1, 2. Hello. Yep.